Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, we're going to be doing a cast assessment of the Survivor 40 cast, talking about all 20 of the players, where I give my thoughts on how well I think each person will do. At the very end of the video, I will give my official winner pick. Now, I'm trying to get this out before all the spoilers start to come in. In about a month or two, I'm sure spoilers will be everywhere. So I want to lock this in before any of that starts to happen. Now, something I will say here is that all these predictions are probably going to be wrong. This is merely how I'm feeling right now, not even a week after the announcement of the cast. So obviously there are 20 winners here. We're going to go through them in chronological order of when they first won the game. So let's start off with Ethan, who I don't feel super confident in him. I feel like he is coming into this game so far removed from Survivor. I do think he could adapt, as I do think he adapted to the game from when he originally played in Africa to All-Stars, but I'm still not super confident about him. He does have some relationships coming into this season. I believe he's pretty good friends with Parvati. He also used to date Amber and had a rivalry with Boston Rob, so who knows how their relationship is now. But I could see him aligning with people like Yule. I could see him aligning with someone like Wendell. I feel like he seems like the sort of guy that could get along with most people. I do think he'll probably make it to the merge, and once he gets to the merge, I don't think he's going to be an immediate threat, but I have a feeling he's going to get taken out somewhere around the mid-merge. Now for the second player, we got Sandra, and I don't feel too great about Sandra's chances here. Obviously, she is the only two-time winner. She's going back here for the fourth time, and I would be very surprised if they let her get to the merge. I think Sandra is in for another run very similar to Game Changers. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. She does have a lot of connections coming into this season, kind of similar to how in Game Changers she had a friendship with Jeff Varner, she had a friendship with Choi Zan. This season she's coming in with a friendship with Boston Rob. She knows Tyson, she knows Parvati, she knows Tony, she knows Sarah. And that's just on the show. She also has relationships with other people from outside the show through charity events. I know she's met Danny Boatwright. I know she's probably met a good amount of these players. But who is going to let Sandra win again? I think she's going to probably make it through the first few rounds. Actually, I could see her being the first boot, in all honesty. But if she makes it through that first round, I do see her at least making it to a swap, probably. But I could very easily see her get swap screwed once again. But even if she doesn't, I just think there's no way they're letting her get to the end. I think if Sandra makes it to the end, she's an automatic win. And that's just something I don't see this cast with this caliber of players actually making the mistake of. So my projection for Sandra is probably an early boot. Now we're moving on to Amber, and I don't feel confident about Amber either. I mean, Amber is someone who I think is good socially, good enough. I mean, she's not great strategically. She's fine. She's just such a meh player to me. And she's coming into this with Boston Rob there. And while Boston Rob has a lot of connections on his own, I don't feel like Amber has a lot of those same connections. As I said before, Amber used to date Ethan, so that's something. Amber obviously is married to Boston Rob, but that's really all the solid connections she has. And I think her connection with Boston Rob is pretty bad for her game. I think the thing that's going to happen here is either Boston Rob goes home early or Amber goes home early. And if I'm putting my money on it, I would say Amber goes home first. I think Boston Rob will be kind of a valuable meat shield for certain players, while Amber really brings nothing to the table. So Amber is a player that, again, I wouldn't be surprised if she's the first or second boot on this season, almost solely because of her relationship with Boston Rob. That being said, though, I do think if Boston Rob goes home first, I think she has a very good shot of making it much further into the game, and quite possibly make it to Final Tribal Council, but even if she gets there, I don't know if she'll have the respect she needs to win the game. So Amber's another one that I'm not super confident about. So next up's Danny Boatwright, and I feel good about Danny Boatwright. I think she's almost locked to make it to the merge. I would be very surprised if she gets taken out really before the final 10. I don't think she's going to be an early merge boot. I don't think she'll be taken out anytime before the merge, but I don't know if she's going to win either. I think the problem with Danny Boatwright is that we've seen so many All-Star seasons now, whereas under the radar female player comes out and wins the game. We've seen Amber, we've seen Parvati, we've seen Sandra. The question is this cast going to allow someone like that to do it again? Mind you, I do think Danny is a bit different than those players. I think Danny is more similar to a Kelly Wentworth type of player, more so than a Amber player. And while I do think she's a very, very strong social player, I don't know if that's going to be enough in this season to take away her threat level. But then again, this is a cast full of threats. There's so many threats in this cast that maybe she can squeak by. But if I was one of these players, I would want to get rid of some of these quote-unquote weaker players like a Danny, like a Michelle. But that might not happen. But my projection is that I think Danny's probably going to go out somewhere around the like final 6, final 7 range. Now we're moving on to Yoke Quan, and Yule's another one. I don't think he's going to do too well. I think Yule is a fantastic strategic player, probably one of the best strategic players of all time. My biggest problem for him is the fact that he has no connections here. The only person we know he has a connection to is Parvati, but even that was a relationship that they were never on that great of terms. However, the good thing about Yule is I do think he has this sort of charisma to him, kind of similar to a Cochrane. He's essentially Cochrane in a very muscular body. The question is are people going to look at him as a threat because of that? Or are people going to look at him as endearing because of that? And I'm thinking that they're going to look at him as a threat. And we just saw pretty recently someone like James Lim play Survivor in Ghost Island and get taken out in a post-swap. I can see a very similar trajectory here for Yul Quan, where I do think he'll get along with certain people. I think he's going to get a pretty strong initial alliance. I could see him aligning with someone like Sophie, someone like Natalie Anderson, someone like even Wendell, someone like Jeremy. I think he has people that I could see him aligning with. But I also think he's in a very bad spot in terms of swaps. I think once he gets this swap, once he's vulnerable, I feel like that's a spot you got to take him out. So my prediction for Yule is probably a late pre-merge boot. But I do think if he makes it to the merge and is able to use someone like a Boston Rob as a meat shield, I think there's a possibility for him to do pretty well in the end game. Now we're moving on to Parvati, and I mean, it's funny. I think I'm saying this all the time. I don't think Parvati is going to do well. And to be honest, a lot of these earlier winners, I don't think are going to do particularly well. And Parvati here, I think comes in as a pretty big threat. I don't think she's as big of a threat as someone like Sandra, someone like Boston Rob, someone like Tony, but she's probably number 4 in my opinion. But I think the biggest problem with Parvati here is, again, her kind of lack of connections. She's not as well connected as Boston Rob or Sandra. She does have some connections. Again, she is friends with Ethan, from what I understand. I believe she knows Danny Boatwright. That could be wrong. Obviously, she knows Yule. She knows Tyson, Sandra, Boston Rob. She does have people that she knows, but I don't feel like she's super close to the people that she does know. And the thing is that Parvati's always had a very rocky start to the game. In Micronesia, she was going to be the first boot if Johnny Fairplay didn't quit the game. And Heroes vs. Villain, she more than likely would have been an early boot if it wasn't for Russell. I could very much see her being like a Sierra Easton in Game Changers, where she's the first boot, where she's this strategic female, tries to get a plan going, absolutely fails, first boot. I could see that being the case. And even if she's not the first boot, I just don't know how you allow Parvati to get too far after that. So my prediction is that Parvati is going to be a very early boot. That being said, though, I do feel like she could build the relationship with some of the other mothers on the cast. She is a recent mother. I feel like her and Kim Spradlin, I feel like could get along. Now we're up to Boston Rob. I think I'm a bit more confident in Boston Rob than most people are. I feel like a lot of people are down on Boston Rob. They think he's going to be an early boot. The question for me is, can he make it past the initial few rounds? I think if he makes it past those first few rounds without being targeted and makes it to the merge, he's going to be a massive target at the merge. He needs to get past that. After that, I think he can go on a Ben run. He can go on a Mike Holloway run. He can go on a Rick Devens run. He can win immunities and he can find idols. And this is a game where we're currently at where that's very important to the actual game at this point. Even though it saddens me to say that, but that is a legitimate way to win the game at this point. And he's shown the ability to find an idol on his seasons. He's won plenty of immunities on his seasons. I think if Boston Rob makes it to around the final 10, I could see him winning out from that point. The main question here is, are people going to allow him to get that far? If I were to put my money on it, though, I feel like it's more likely that he gets taken out around the merge. I don't think he's an early boot, but a boot around the merge feels about right to me. Next up, we got Sophie Clark. I think there's 2 potential outcomes for Sophie. I feel like she could be an early boot, probably around the first swap or so. I think someone like a Rourke trajectory seems about right for Sophie Clark. Or I think she can get like a Gabby trajectory, where she makes it to the merge, kind of under the radar for a little bit, and then eventually starts to make moves and probably gets taken out immediately afterwards. I don't think Sophie is winning this game. The problem I have with Sophie is I do feel like she's a bit abrasive at points. She did get a bit emotional on points in South Pacific that I do think harmed her game. I think she has a very strong mind for the game, so maybe she can get past that. But if I were to bet, I would say she would probably go out around the 7 to 8 spot after trying to make a big move and fail. Now we're moving on to Kim Spradlin, and she is one of the best players to ever play the game. She played one of the most dominant games I've ever seen in the history of Survivor, but can she play a game to that caliber again? I'm not sure. I think Kim has everything she needs to play a dominant game once again. The question is, are they going to allow her to do so? Do they remember Kim Spradlin? I don't know if they do. While Kim is known as one of the best players to the online community, I feel like within the actual general Survivor audience, they don't remember Kim anymore. It's been 8 years since she's played, and I feel like there is a chance that they just forget about her. However, there are some super fans on this cast. There's Adam, there's Nick, and I feel like if you do remember how good she is, you need to get her out. Probably right before the merge. But if I were to guess, I will say that she will probably at least make the merge. I could easily see her getting targeted around the final 11 or 12. Now we're moving on to Denise. Okay, Denise, I think, has a decent chance at being the first boot. If she's not the first boot, I think she makes it very far. I think she probably makes it to the end of the game. I think she's pretty much a lock for the end game. I just don't see a reason why you would get rid of her after those initial few votes. The question for me is, does she play more actively than she did last time? I think Denise as a player is a bit overrated from her game in Philippines, as in my opinion, she just played the end game so passively and would have easily made the mistake of taking Malcolm to the end if it wasn't for Malcolm playing poorly. So the question here for me is she going to get this killer instinct? Is she going to start making moves on her own? Based on interviews I've seen of her on the RJP and stuff, I don't think she will. So because of that, I could very likely see her being taken to the final 3 as a GOAT. Now we're moving on to Tyson, and I think Tyson has a shot here. This is his 4th time playing. He knows what it's like to lose the game twice. Problem for him, I think, is that this cast is not like any other cast we've ever seen. This is a cast where I don't feel like they really casted for archetypes nearly as much. There's a lot of people on this cast that are very similar archetypes. There's Amber and Parvati, I think, are pretty similar. Kim and Danny, who are pretty similar. And because of this, I do feel like there are less massive physical threats in this game. I feel like Tyson is one of those physical threats. So while I do feel like Tyson is pretty much a lock to make it to the merge, I do think there might be some trouble once he gets there, especially if Boston Rob's not in the game anymore. I feel like that might be his time to be taken out. But I do feel like if he does still have meat shields by that point, I could very likely see him making a pretty deep run into the game, possibly even winning the game. But for me, it's going to really come down to how well he's able to play in the pre-merge, and really he's got to hope for some luck involved as well to get some bigger threats to emerge. Now we're moving on to Tony, and it sucks to say, but I think Tony is the one lock for being an early boot. Like a lot of the other people that I've talked about so far as being early boots, I think there's a chance that they can make it far. I literally do not see any way Tony makes it to the first swap. And it sucks. It sucks because I love Tony. I love Tony so much. He's my favorite character in all of Survivor. But I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, how is it going to happen? I guess he would need to win like the first couple immunity challenges for his tribe and then get to a swap. And maybe from there he'll have enough connections built up to where he can survive. But it's not looking good. I think the legend of Tony is still there. And the biggest shame of this is I don't think he'll really be given a shot to even play. I think at this point, especially after what happened in Game Changers, where for a second they had the Threats Alliance put together, but then Tony instantly flipped on Sandra, I feel like it makes it so he's even less trustworthy than he was coming into Game Changers. And with other big targets like Sandra and Rob having so many connections that Tony doesn't have, the only connections Tony has in this season are Sarah, which I do think is a pretty strong connection, but he has Sarah, he has possibly Sandra. I know they were on good terms after Game Changers. And he possibly has someone like Jeremy, who I know that they've spoken for. But, I mean, Tony's been completely isolated from the community for a while now. I don't think that's a good sign here. So if I were to guess, I think he's probably one of the first few boots. Now we're moving on to Natalie Anderson. And I feel like for Natalie Anderson, my opinion is pretty similar to what I thought of Sophie Clark. I do think Natalie Anderson has more agency in her game. And I feel like she probably has a bit more self-control. So I do feel a bit more confident that Natalie will make it further, but I'm not entirely sure of how far she'll make it. She does have some connections on the cast. She obviously has Jeremy, who should be a pretty good, strong connection to her, but could also possibly make her a target as well. To be honest, coming into this season, I really thought Natalie would have been higher on my winner predictions, but to be honest, it's not really that anymore. I mean, for me, I think she's pretty middle of the road at this point, and if I were to guess, I would say she probably gets taken out probably around the final 7 range, like the mid-merge, I think. But I do think she's also another one of these possibilities like Sophie, where she could be taken out pre-merge as well. Now we're moving on to Jeremy, and Jeremy I think is a lock to make it to merge. Coming into this season, he has a good amount of connections, but I don't think he has anyone going after him. I mean, he has a connection with Natalie Anderson. I think he can build a relationship with Boston Rob pretty easily. Him and Michelle are both from Boston. I remember him, Tyson, and Kim were all in a poker game, so that's at least something. I think he's coming into this with a decent amount of connections. And he's just so good socially, I feel like. Especially for the early game. I think he's just this presence that you want to be around. And we saw that in Cambodia, where like he was just instantly drawn into alliance with Andrew Savage. Instantly drawn into alliance with Joe. And I feel like this similar thing is going to happen here. But I think he'll also be able to pick up people like Adam Klein or Nick Wilson. Just like he did with Stephen Fishback. So I think that's great setup in the pre-merge. And then once he gets to the merge, I think, again, like Tyson, I think if he's able to have these bigger threats around, someone like a Boston Rob, someone like a Tony, I think he can slip by. And by the point he gets towards the end game, I think he's good enough with finding idols, and he can win immunities to the point where I could see him winning out. So personally, I do have Jeremy going pretty far in my opinion. Now we're moving on to Michelle, and I don't know. I think Michelle is going to play harder than she did last time. The question is it going to be hard enough? I think Michelle is coming into this being very underestimated, and rightfully so. But the biggest thing about Michelle for me, especially if she doesn't play radically different than she did last time, is I feel like if she gets to the end, are these people really going to award Michelle the win again? Are they really going to want to have Michelle as the two-time winner of Survivor? And I don't really feel like that's going to be the case unless, again, she just plays radically differently. While I do think she'll play more aggressive, I do think she'll try to make some moves here and there, I just don't see her actually doing enough to win the game. I could very likely see her getting to the end of the game. I just don't think she gets the jury votes once she gets there. And even without that, I could very likely see her being an early boot as well. So I'm not super confident about Michelle's chances. Now we're moving on to Adam Klein, and I don't know what to think about Adam Klein. Again, he is a super fan of the game. He's shown the ability to think strategically. While whether he executes on those thoughts is a bit questionable. But like Michelle, I do feel like he'll be underestimated coming into this season. But unlike Michelle, I do feel like he could be respected enough to where he could get the jury votes at the end. However, I do feel like Adam Klein is the type of person, though, that would eventually get caught up in his lies and eventually get targeted for trying to make a big move. But then again, he is also good with finding idols, so that is something. But I think Adam's really got to play hard if he wants to win the game. Again, there's just so many other people in this cast that I could see winning against him. That I feel like he's going to have to make some pretty big moves and getting out some pretty big players if he ever wants to have a shot at winning this game. Now we're moving on to Sarila Cena, and I think she could win again. To be honest, out of all the females in the cast, I think she's probably one of the ones I'm the most confident about. I think the thing that really surprised me in Game Changers is just how good she is socially, how good she was able to connect with pretty much everyone on her tribe, which allowed her to sneak by to the merge. And I feel like it's very likely that something like that happens again here. I don't think Sarah is going to be looked at as like the biggest threat on the tribe, no matter what the tribe configurations are. And once she gets to the merge, I think she has the strategic ability to maneuver around the game. Just like a lot of the winners I talked about before, though, I do think there's a chance that she eventually gets caught and taken out in the mid-game. But for me, I feel like it's very likely that she does make it towards the end of the game. But I could see her getting sniped very close to the end. I think the biggest thing for her, though, is, I think she's one of these that doesn't come in with too many relationships. She does have a relationship with Tony, and she kind of has one with Sandra. Now, I'm not entirely sure of who she's met outside of the game, but she's not the most well-connected person on this cast, and has had less time to connect to a lot of these people. So I feel like that might be the biggest hindrance to her game here. Now we're moving on to Ben, and for me, I feel like Ben should be the first person out, or one of the first few out. There's no way you can let Ben get anywhere in this game, I think. I think the only way Ben makes it pretty far in this game is if he's able to either, one, find idols all the time and survives, or if he's able to connect himself to someone like a Boston Rob, or someone like even a Jeremy, or a Wendell, which I do think is possible. And that allows him to get somewhere towards the merge, and then from the merge on, he could just do the same thing again. He can wait for like the Boston Robs to be taken out, and then after that, idles his way to the end. Do I think it'll happen? No, I don't. I do think he'll probably be taken out early. And to be honest, even if he does get to the merge, I think he's going to be one of those bigger targets to where you feel like you need to get rid of him. So I don't feel confident about Ben's chances at all. Now we're moving on to Wendell, and I think Wendell is someone else that I'm very confident about. I think Wendell's someone that it makes no sense for him to go out pre-merge. I mean, no one's targeting him. But at the same time, I do feel like he has less relationships than a lot of the other cast members. But at the same time, I do feel like he's recently been doing a lot of events and has been meeting a whole bunch of different Survivor players, possibly in preparation for this. So maybe he was able to make some last-minute connections here. But even without that, I just feel like he's someone that you're not going to target right away. Now, I think the biggest problem for him is, does he become a big threat at the merge? Like I said with Tyson, I feel like, again, there's not as many big physical threats in this game, meaning I could very likely see Wendell becoming one of those physical threats, especially because Cass had just seen Ghost Island not too long ago, where he does win a couple immunities at the end and also has an idol. I think, again, with them just watching Edge of Extinction and watched how important immunity wins and idols are, I think this could cause him to target Wendell earlier than what he normally would have. But if we take that out of the way, I do think there's a very good chance that Wendell makes it very far in the game, and I think he's one of those players that could possibly win again. And now for the final cast member, we got Nick Wilson, and for me, he's a bit tough to really place here. As I said with Ghost Island, they just saw David vs. Goliath. They saw him win the final 3 immunities in the game. They saw him find idols. They saw him make big moves like the John Hennigan blindside. And they just saw that he isn't as dumb as he likes to portray. So I think because of all that, that might cause him to be a pretty big target coming in. But again, there's just so many other bigger targets. I mean, there's Tony, there's Boston Rob, there's Sandra, there's Parvati. Is really Nick Wilson the biggest priority there? I don't think so. So I could see him getting to the merge. And the question at that point is whether he built up enough relationships up to that point to continue on. And I think he probably would. But I just don't feel like he's the winner. And he's another player that if he gets to the end, I can see him winning the game. The big thing there, though, is who's going to get to the end. Again, I've said that for quite a few players up to this point. But obviously, only 3 players are getting to the end, meaning and only one of them can win out of those 3. And I think that's a testament to this cast here, where there's just so many different scenarios that can happen. This is probably the strongest cast in the history of Survivor from a gameplay perspective, which makes it very unpredictable to pick who is going to win, because I feel like everyone here has a good chunk of equity in winning the game outside of probably someone like Tony. So yeah, that is every winner. But now let's talk about who I think is going to win. And it's a bit up in the air. Again, there's so many options here. I think Jeremy is a good option. I think Wendell's a good option. I think Nick is an option. He's not going to be it, but I think he is an option. I think Sarila Cena is an option for me. I even think someone like, as I mentioned earlier, Natalie Anderson, while I do find more faults in her game, I do think she is another option as well. I think Tyson is an option. I think Danny Boatwright is an option. There's just so many people here that I think have a shot at winning. Even Kim Spradlin. But who's it going to be? When I first saw the cast announced, my first impression was Danny Boatwright. Danny Boatwright would have been it. I have such confidence in Danny Boatwright as a player. But again, I thought about it more and I just kind of talked myself out of it. And I mean, as you can assume based on the way I talked about them, I feel like I've kind of narrowed it down to Jeremy or Wendell. Both of them I picked as my winner picks for Cambodia and for Ghost Island, so I was correct at those times. So I think I might go the same direction this time. The matter is, which one do I pick? I'm going for Jeremy. Now, this is my 3rd time picking Jeremy as the winner. Again, I picked him in San Juan del Sur as well. But I do think I'm going to side with Jeremy. And the reason for that is, I mentioned this before, where I feel like there is going to be this idea that Wendell could be a physical threat. With him also being able to find idols on top of that, I do feel like it's very likely that he could be taken out somewhere early mid-merge. While someone like Jeremy has never really shown the ability to win challenges. He's won 1 immunity in each of his seasons, but in San Juan del Sur it was a memory challenge, and then in Cambodia it was Sin Emotion. He's never won an actual physical challenge, not a real puzzle challenge. The type of challenges that are usually there in Survivor, he hasn't won. Another thing that I think puts him above Wendell is the fact that he's a family man. The fact that he has a wife and children. I think that puts him above Wendell as he's able to connect to a lot more of these cast members more. People like Kim, people like Danny, people like Boston Rob. I mean, this cast is filled with married people with children. This is a much older cast than what we typically get, where I believe 15 out of the 20 contestants here are married, which is a ridiculously high number. I think because of that, Jeremy's gonna have a much easier time getting along with these other castaways than Wendell does. And I've always had such confidence in Jeremy as a player, even from when he first got announced to be on San Juan del Sur. And that's why I picked him as my winner pick for San Juan del Sur. Obviously, he gets taken out on the blind side there. But I think that's because he was one of the few good players on that season. And when he got brought back for Cambodia, where there were so many other bigger threats around, he was able to masterfully maneuver his way through the game, and I think a similar thing is going to happen here. So that's why Jeremy is going to be my winner pick. So that's it. That's the video. I went through every person on this cast. Again, this is entirely speculation. This is probably going to be entirely wrong. But Oh well. So this will probably be my last Survivor 40 video for quite a while. I don't know what other type of video I can do with Survivor 40 at this point. But yeah, I will move on to, I will do a Survivor winner ranking at some point, and then also do season ranking. Probably do similar things for Big Brother and International Survivor and a whole bunch of other stuff. But yeah, that's the video. Thank you for watching.